Welcome to The Productive Life with Megan Minns. I am so excited for this week's episode because we are talking to my good friend, Amanda Boleyn of She Did It Her Way. This is one of my really good friends, one of my business besties, and I can't wait for you to hear this episode because we are talking about why you shouldn't waste time on making your website perfect, how to overcome fear and overwhelm, how micro actions can help you make more progress in your business, how we both manage our weekly schedules, and outsourcing, and so much more. So I'm so excited for this episode. You are going to love it. Welcome to the Productive Life podcast hosted by me, Megan Minns. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to be more productive in their business and their personal life. Because as a business owner, your business and personal life are connected, and we can't talk about one without talking about the other. Each week, you'll learn about productivity, organization, personal development, self-care, business strategies, and more. And now, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for this episode. Amanda is one of my really good friends, and she shares some incredible tips, tricks, and beliefs that we all need in our business. So you're going to love this one. If you don't know who Amanda is, let me give you a quick background. Amanda is the founder and CEO of She Did It Her Way. Shortly after 2 years in corporate America, she decided to take the leap and become a full-time freelancer. Around January 2015 is when Amanda started her podcast called the She Did It Her Way podcast, which has consistently been ranked as one of the top resources for female entrepreneurs and has been downloaded over 2 million times and continues to grow to this day. I first met Amanda back in 2017, and we have been business besties ever since, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast today. So let's go ahead and jump into the interview right now. Hey, Amanda, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm so excited for everyone in my community to get to know you because we have known each other for a few years now, and you're one of my internet business besties, and I'm so excited to chat today. So I would love it if you would just introduce yourself briefly so that our audience can hear and learn a little bit more about what you do and who you are.
Yeah. Well, Megan, thank you for having me. It's such an honor and a privilege to be on the other side of the beautiful mic. And for any of you guys listening who don't know me, I am Amanda Boleyn, and I am the founder and creator of She Did It Her Way, which I feel like I could spend hours talking about that journey, but it started out as a podcast in 2015. And today there's a bunch of different things that we have going on. But the main premise is that we help women make their ultimate leap from corporate America to entrepreneurship.
I love what you do. And that's how we really first got to know each other was at the first She Did It Her Way summit. That was the first one, right?
Yeah, which is crazy to think that was back in, actually, She Did It Her Way summit in fall of 2017 was probably one of my first steps in monetizing / making She Did It Her Way a business, because it really sat, and I tell this story all the time, that for me and my journey in 2015 when the podcast launched, it was really out of, having it be a hobby with no lens of anticipation to make it a business or anything like that. I mean, going back into my story, I quit my corporate job in 2012 and became a full-time freelancer where I was traveling every single week to a different country or city or state. And it was amazing. I was doing work that I loved, and it really didn't feel like work, but living out of a suitcase, I just wanted something of my own. And I started the podcast, but it wasn't until that She Did It Her Way summit, which was like the first test to really see, is there something here? What is it? And it was pretty awesome. And you spoke at it. So that's where we first met in person. I love the online space because you can connect with anyone. Yeah.
And you showed me Chicago, introduced me to the city. That was my first time there.
Yes.
We had so much fun. It's a pretty interesting thing in my mind that when you decided to start monetizing your business in a real way, your first approach was to do a live event, which I think a lot of people would be intimidated by that. I know I still haven't done a paid live event because it feels just so different than doing online stuff. So tell me a little bit about that. What made you decide to go with a live event as your monetization strategy?
There are probably a couple of different things. I mean, at that stage, like if I knew what I know now, I mean, I look back on everything that I built with She Did It Her Way and the order that I built it. And it wouldn't be considered the most conventional way based on what now I'm learning through different courses and mentors. But for me, I really enjoyed events because I loved bringing people together. I loved meeting them in person. I had put on previous events through like other things that I had been a part of. So I was just really comfortable with the events and being able to, I guess, be the maestro. This is going off as such a tangent, but the Fascinate Me quiz by Sally tells you what people are most fascinated by you. It's not necessarily like it is a strength, but it's not like a Myers-Briggs. It's more about what are things that people look at you and they get fascinated by? And one of that for me was being a maestro is what it's called, and the ability to bring people together and create this sense of environment and a sense of learning and like having my connection. So it felt very natural, intuitive. It felt fun. I was excited. I wanted to try it out. And it was awesome. We had in less than 3 months. So I put it together right after I got married in 2017 in August. And I started promoting it, and we had just about 35 women from 11 different states fly in for a one-day event in Chicago, and it was awesome. So I kind of took that route. And then now since then, like I have online courses, I've got coaching programs and things like that. And the summit is still very much part of She Did It Her Way. But yeah, I don't know. I was like, oh, I like events. Let's do this. I can do it. I love project managing. I love being on top of the flow of things. So I said, okay, let's try it.
I love that. It's so inspiring. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Amanda, she and I are very like-minded in that we are both into systems and processes. And she and I will geek out over Asana or ClickUp or like new tools to use pretty regularly. So Amanda has that as her like definite zone of genius, is the systems and operations that go into running a business. So I'm not shocked that you ran your first event so smoothly. Like I'm not shocked that it felt like it wasn't your first time because you have that background. But I also think it's really interesting, just so everyone knows, that Amanda and I are both on a journey of intuition and how to incorporate your intuition and your mindset work into running a business when your tendency is to be a little bit more logical and operational based. So I'm curious if we go deeper into that a little bit later, but I just wanted everyone to know where you and I are at throughout this conversation. Yeah. But I really want to dig in. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one more thing about the in-person event. I remember I'm so grateful for my friend, Shauna Van Bogart, she went to University of Iowa. We actually never met while we were at Iowa, but we both went through the entrepreneurial program and we got connected as alumni. And she was a speaker at my event, and she flew up from Charleston, and she was there with me Thursday all the way through Sunday. And I had this freak out moment of like, oh my gosh, all these people are going to be here. I can't do it. I'm never doing an in-person event again. I'm going to just stay online. Like I'm going to do a virtual summit, all this stuff. And then it was like, I'm sharing it because I think so often you just have like when you are scared and in that moment when you want to take a detour, like had I made that decision, I would have clammed up, but you have to practice the behavior of like always wanting to expand your comfort zone. And at the end of the event, I was like, all right, when's the next one? And I did the next one 6 months later, which was a little crazy, but And then to your point, like the journey of the masculine and the intuition piece is like, I'm definitely through healers and people that I've seen, they're like, you operate in this very masculine space. And so learning what you teach with intuitive execution, also learning like, how do I pause and not be so much in the do 100% of the time, but only operate at 50% or maybe 70% and really create space with the remaining space and really leverage it to listen and to check in, because, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but like our entire society is like work hard. And like, even I, like growing up with my parents, both like blue collar and not college educated, it was very much like you have to work hard. Money doesn't grow on trees. And so a lot of us are built with these certain constructs, and it's just totally different. So definitely on that seeking journey, which I know we'll get into later on in the show.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to talk more about all of that. I think one thing that would be really interesting for the people who are listening, who are maybe where you were before you did the summit, have a business, maybe they haven't really felt confident enough to start making money, or they have an idea for a business, or they're side hustling. What are some things that you think, maybe whether it's that you would do differently or that you feel like you've learned now that you deal with clients who kind of make these common mistakes that you would love to like make sure people don't don't do what we all did the hard way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the mistakes I guess you could call it a mistake. Reframing the mistake and just saying, like things that people focus on when maybe it's not the right time to focus on it. And going back to like when I quit corporate in 2012, there's like a whole journey that had led me to that point. And I had networked my way to a point where I was getting contracts, like gigs, so that it would sustain me. Now, like when I work with women, it's really about how can you take your skill set that you already have, you don't need additional training, and how do you turn that into a business and find your own clients. So for example, if you are doing social media in a company, but you're just like, I'm over this corporate environment. I spend, I don't know, like an hour and a half commuting because I live in Chicago. So it's very easy that you could spend that time commuting, even if you live in the city. Wow. And you're just ready to have autonomy. I think oftentimes like a few challenges or a few things where people get caught up is, they think like, one, I don't even know what services that I'd even offer. A second thing is that they focus too much on website and branding and thinking that the website and the branding is what's actually going to sell their services, when in reality, you have to get out and sell your services. You have to send the emails. You have to face the music or potential rejection, which I think a lot of people, and including myself in the past, anytime that we are fearful of rejection or what people think of us, it really stalls us out. And so that is, it's easy to go into the website and use building your website and brand as buffering and thinking that you're doing things, which you are doing things. But ultimately, if you want to quit your job, you have to do the activities that are going to help you create money and revenue. And the first thing is that I always say is you got to get out in front and start networking with people and sending direct emails as well. And so those are really two key things is, focusing on if you say I don't even know what services I'd offer. And I always tell people it's not about getting it perfect. It's just about getting started. And we can go into certain things that I recommend to help people really figure out what services they can offer. Because there's also another block around, well, if I know how to do this, why would someone pay me money? Which is kind of hilarious. And I felt this way too. I'm like, well, I'm really good at this. It just comes natural. Why would I charge someone? Because it's so easy for me. If it's easy for you to do, then yes, you should be charging, because that means that you have you're particularly proficient at a certain level in that skill set, and people need that. And then it also goes into a mindset thing. And then, the website, it's kind of one of those, it's important, but it's a secondary thing to just getting clients. And I know people have built 6-figure service-based businesses with little to no website. Even my virtual assistant, I never looked at her website. I don't even know if she had a website. She came as a referred person, and I did an interview and I enjoyed her. And then when other business owners asked me about my VAs, I then recommend her. And now she has 4 clients out of that. So website, it's definitely yes, it's important, but it's secondary to someone understanding their skill set and starting to network and getting clients, especially if you want to quit your 9-to-5, because the quickest way to do that is to make money elsewhere outside of your 9-to-5.
Yeah. The website thing I think is huge, because you can so easily procrastinate with your website and you were kind of touching on this, and still feel like you're being productive. You kind of can trick yourself into oh, I have to do this. This is the first priority. And even one of my friends now, who has a full-time job, she's looking to start a business on the side. And the first thing, she's not in the entrepreneurial space. That's not at all where her full-time job is. And she was all of a sudden really caught up in the branding and the website. And I was look, just straight up pick any Squarespace template, put up anything. You're going to change. Your business is going to change. The copy you want on there is going to change. Your aesthetic's going to change. It's more important to just have something than to have like the perfect thing, because it's really not a deal breaker. But I think it's really common to get hung up there. And that's coming from, I used to be a web designer and I started my first blog like in college. So like in 2011 or something. And I straight up I spent years probably just putting out a couple pieces of content and just spending all of my time redesigning the website constantly. It's such an easy thing to get sucked into, especially if you start to enjoy the process. It's just like, oh, I need to rebrand. And so that's all you do. And even now, like seasoned entrepreneurs, I think can fall into that trap too, of like every time their business pivots or evolves a little bit, they feel like they have to update the website before they can actually fully execute the pivot. And it's like, no, just start selling the new thing. And like, you can update the website later. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
No, it is. And it definitely is something that like even now I am launching a beta program called Website Your Way in September, because I know that it is such a mental block for so many people, like to really get started on their business. And again, I think, let me back up. It really depends on the type of business that you want to build. So if you are going into a service-based business, which is where I like to focus, and start with services, because that's really where you start to see where you can provide value. It's kind of like your data, your testing. So you're getting a lot of data and feedback about what you like teaching, what do you not like doing, and all this stuff. And then you kind of move into an online space where then you might have coaching programs or courses and things like that, where, the website does matter. But like back to what you were saying, it doesn't, the website, there's some basics to have that's important, but ultimately, like, I remember thinking I paid someone almost like $500 to transfer all this content from one site to another, because I was convinced that if I had a different layout, I would therefore make more money. And now in hindsight, I'm like, Amanda, girl, you were like, what were you thinking? Because it's really like the selling of the thing, if you have a course or you have a service, is done so mainly by the copy, and also like the messaging, also like your persistence to follow up in like an email. So that, it's important, but not the primary focus that people should spend time on.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you kind of mentioned this, that maybe there's a mental block there. Do you often find in your experience that like the mental block people are having with their website is that maybe the real issue is that they feel a little bit of that fraud, like they feel like a fraud, or they don't feel like they can actually show up and charge anything until they have this website that like quote unquote validates them as an expert? Is that something you feel like people deal with?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a little bit of mixture there. What I can say is that I have found that people will delay starting their business until they have their website. And I think it's because there is, to what you're saying, that mental block about wanting to have that to really feel comfortable that they can charge. But the other thing is that building a website, especially, so going back to what you were saying, like our brains work in a very systematic way. We can look at something super complex, something that may, or at least for me anyway, like look at something that may overwhelm someone and say, I can like literally go through my mind and go, okay, what are the most important things here? Let's forget about 80% of the stuff that doesn't matter, that you can like, doesn't matter in this moment, just to get started. I'm a really big proponent of like an catalyst for action, and getting people just to get in the habit of taking action and getting started, and really breaking down, just saying like, these are the core things that you need. Let's get the first ugly rough draft out and then iterate on top of that. I find when I work with people, and this is just, I think a lot of people, and including myself, I've been there, where we start to pole vault over mouse turds, where we make things a bigger deal in our mind than what they actually are. So that causes overwhelm, and then people just don't take action. So I like to work with individuals through my courses or coaching programs to say like, let's clear out the noise. How do we get you to take like tiny micro actions every single day, so that you get comfortable taking the actions and receiving the feedback, whether it's like something didn't work or it did work or it fell flat, but like, how do you also then make, the quote unquote failure, like what do you make the failure mean? And like, how do we mentally overcome that and work through it and things like that? So part of it, I think, like there's a deeper rooted block, what you were saying. And the second piece is that it's just overwhelming to build a website, but then it also creates this buffer mechanism that if they say that, okay, well, I can't launch my business until my website, then they're kind of protecting themselves from rejection, right? Like from taking that massive action where it's like messy, massive action. So there's a lot, I think there's definitely mentality wrapped up into it.
Isn't it funny how mindset plays such a role in everything we do, even when we don't realize it? I think I was taking notes while you were talking because there's a lot of things you mentioned that I would love to explore and learn a little bit more about your approach to things and your thoughts and your experiences. And one thing that really stuck out, you mentioned it a few times, was the idea of this like fear of potential rejection and how really in order to grow a business, in order to make money, we have to work to overcome that fear. And I was just curious, are there any strategies that you have done? Like, how have you overcome that fear? Is it through, like, you tell me?
That's a really good question. I
know there's not like a one size fits all solution, but just since it, tell me your experience though.
I mean, one of the things that I'll do, and I'll give you the example first, just to put it in perspective, is on a coaching call last week, one of my students was afraid to send an email out to her network to inform them about the services that she can offer. And she kind of got caught up in the fact that she's like, oh, I only met this person once at a networking event. Like, what will they think of me if I reach out to them? Will they remember me? Will they be like, who is this person? All this stuff. And so our brain loves to default to like worst case scenario. And so what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, but what, like assume the best. And then what are you missing out on? So I said, well, what is also like, what if this person that you would reach out to, instead of thinking that they're going to reject you, what if they introduced you to someone that could be your ticket out of your corporate job? Mm-hmm. Another easy thing is like people will think about how much money they're giving up when they leave their corporate job, and they'll think like, oh my gosh, like this isn't as high a salary, like I'm not making as much. But then they'll think about all the things that could go wrong that keeps them in their job, but they don't think about like the potential upside of doing that thing, right? So I always put in perspective, like if I get afraid to do something, I really ask myself, like, where is this fear coming from? And then instead of focusing on like all the negative aspects of it, I think about like the potential, like the positive side of it. Because we always think about like the negative side, but it's like, how do you reframe it in your brain? And then also think about like, you know, where do you want to be in a year from now? Is you being like, are you doing what you're doing today over and over? Like, if you stay small and you stay stuck, is that going to get you to where you want to be a year from now, 10 years from now? And so kind of leveraging the potential pain of staying where I'm at today is enough to motivate me to take action instead of being afraid.
Yeah, and overcome that fear. I love that you focus a lot on the positive, like the potential. So you're right, like our brain does default to like all the fears and the worst case scenarios. But if we just take a minute and think about, you know, all of the potential positive outcomes or results, even if the worst case happens as well, like that's an exercise I like to do is like, okay, let's even explore the worst case. And oftentimes when you truly verbalize the worst case scenario, you're like, well, I could manage, I could make that happen. Like I could deal with that. Like I could move on from there. It's not usually actually that bad. But I think it's really key. I love what you said about bringing in the positive though, and like start to get excited and feel like that potential is worth overcoming the fear and getting uncomfortable. And another thing you mentioned too is the micro actions and how almost like making it these small actions can help. So I'd love to know more about what micro actions are, like some examples of a micro action, because I think this concept, like I'm really interested in this concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm going to use the website example. So instead of thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to build a website, it's really kind of didacting and like stepping back and saying, what are all the pieces that go into building a website and how can you break them down into the smallest pieces possible so that it's no longer about, oh my gosh, I need to build this website. I have no idea to start. And it's more about like, what are the specific steps I need to take? So maybe a specific step is I need to go and select a template on Squarespace. So that's a step, maybe not step one, but it might be. And then another step, like part of going into a website, building a website is your about me page, your sales page, and maybe your landing page. So then, okay, to create an about me page, what goes into that? It goes into writing a rough draft bio. Maybe a task or something, a micro action might be like spending 30 minutes researching other people's about me page or Googling like what makes a really good about me page. And then the next 30 minutes is based on what you learned from the previous 30 minutes. It's okay, let me write my first draft, set it for 30 minutes, go. Then I need to go back and get it proofread. Like, so really breaking down in these like small specific steps, because that like the result that you want is a website that is built. But then how can you break down into tiny micro steps that will get you there? Because also what happens is that our brains don't love ambiguity, and they don't like things to be, our brains don't love for vagueness, if that's a word. So if you say you're going to do something like build my website, that's pretty vague. So if you were working a full-time job and then you go home to work on your website and you see build my website and you're like, oh, I don't even know where to start. You open up your laptop, you're like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. You shut the laptop and you never take action. But if you can break it down into small micro actions to get you there, to piece it apart, then the system itself of the micro actions will take care of the result that you want, which is a built website.
I love
that. So
that.
that's just one example.
Because it's so much easier. Like when you were giving that example, if you just come home after work and instead of seeing build website on your to-do list and instead you see select Squarespace template, how much easier is that to take action on? So much clarity, and it feels really doable and bite-sized. And I think you're touching on something, you know this since you really specialize in helping people who have 9-to-5 jobs. But as a person who has had a 9-to-5 job as well and built businesses on the side, the overwhelm is huge. And whether you've built a business before or not, no matter how long you've been side hustling, I think getting overwhelmed as a side hustler, it's really easy to get overwhelmed, not only from just big projects, but there is a true time constraint. And so it kind of, you start to have this stress around like every single hour when you could be working. At least for me, it felt like this big struggle between like, do I work or do I relax? Do I go to this social event or do I build my business? Like what, you're always asking yourself that question. And so anytime we can do things such as micro actions to make anything easier and less overwhelming, and having decisions made in advance is going to make everything feel so much easier. But I think for me, I remember that tension of like not only the big project on the to-do list every day, but like trying to figure out when I was even going to work on it. Like, how was I ever going to get a website done when I just had a couple hours a week?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a reality. And some people that I've worked with too, I mean, they're mothers, they have their full-time job, they've got a family. And so they are trying to like squeeze. And I think too is, whether you have a full-time job and you're side hustling or you are a business owner, it's so important to become a ninja with your time so that you can maximize your time to get what it is that you want to get done. And I think that having the constraint of a full-time job while learning how to become a time ninja is such good training ground for when you become an entrepreneur, because and I always teach when I work in like coaching that one of the first things that I always do with all my students is I teach them how to time block, and I teach them how to think about and like schedule out their time, and like also designate office hours or designate chunks of time in their schedule that they're going to dedicate to the coaching program, that they're going to dedicate to the things that they said they want to get done. And what you were saying too, it's like that split energy of like, oh, I want to be social or I want to do this, but then I want to build my business. And it so helps to decide ahead of time, like decide ahead of time for the next 3 months, you're just going to like give your business 6 hours a week, and then find the 6 hours on your schedule, block it out. And then within those blocks, you're going to go in and you're going to be specific about the micro actions and things that you want to do. And I always say, like, don't get discouraged if you only have 2 hours a week to give, because 2 hours to give towards your business, like that effort is not wasted. It is totally not wasted, because then you have 8 hours in a month and you have 24 hours in a quarter, and 2 hours is better than 0 hours. Just like I always say, working out, like sometimes now I only do 20, 30-minute workouts where before I would do 45 minutes to an hour. And I'm like, I need to, 20 minutes, like not beat myself up on a smaller workout because 20 minutes is better than 0 minutes. But going back to like, I just did this process, which, one of my products is called Scale Your Way, which we can talk about. We don't need to talk about the product. We can talk about why I created it, but it's really, like getting it up on Evergreen and putting something on Evergreen. I've never done it before, but I know basically what needs to get done. And I put a due date of like September 11th. And so I just grabbed a blank sheet of paper and I wrote down everything as specific as possible that I needed to do. And then I went through and I ordered them of like, this has to happen before this has to happen before that. Then I pulled up my calendar and I scheduled it. And I put it into Asana. So then every 30-minute increments, I know exactly what I need to do so that by September 11th, everything's set up on Evergreen. And of course, like I built in buffers because I'll probably have questions or things aren't going to go exactly according to plan. But then that way it's, like you're producing what it is. Same thing if someone wants to build a website, you can do the same exact process.
I love that. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that you did build in buffer because I was going to ask you one thing that I've talked to my community about, and mainly on Instagram stories. So if you hang out with me on Instagram stories, we've talked about this. But it's the idea of planning where there like is a line of over planning. And so that's something that I'm always really careful about with like my own planning efforts now, because I love to plan, is instead of spending too much I don't want to spend hours and hours planning out stuff too far in advance where it's always changing. But I think that's not exactly what you're talking about here. Because really, we're recording this, in August. So September 11th, that's not like months away. That's like a couple of weeks away. So you're still looking at kind of a shorter, really clear time frame that you're planning out. So you have a really good, clear sense of like your availability when you're in the office, when you're not in the office. And since you built in buffer, that means that the likelihood of you having to continue to shuffle things around goes down. So I just wanted to like point that out for anyone listening that like Amanda isn't, and it's okay if you do this, Amanda, obviously we're different people, but like Amanda's not talking about a project she's planned out every single hour of for like 3 months long of a project. It's like a much shorter time period.
I did that once. Last October, I planned my entire 2019 and I will tell you, it doesn't look anything like that. Like, I think it's, because you're right. We can also buffer through planning and plan. And like, you just have to know that about yourself. So for you and I, it's easy to get into the habit of wanting to plan because it can sometimes be a buffer mechanism because then we're not taking action, right? But I used to be that person that I would plan out in detail, like everything that was going to happen. And a couple of things that I did to help, I guess, how could you say like that have actually been more effective is I know, so it's the month of August. I have a pretty good idea of potential launches. I have a pretty good idea of a roadmap of things that I want to do. So for example, like month of September is my beta program with Website Your Way. And then in mid-October, I want to do another beta program for like email marketing and online courses so that people can understand that because ultimately, and the new year is my course launch of Ultimate Leap Suite Academy, which is a full comprehensive course that will include how to build your website, that will include the legal aspects of starting your business, that will include the money management, that will include email marketing, that will include like all these things. And so for me, if I know that like I want to launch that in the new year early, I'm basically beta testing some pretty large modules away. So I know that September is Website Your Way beta. Then mid-October is going to be my like the email marketing your way or whatever I want to call it beta program. And so I've got like pretty, that roadmap. You build out that roadmap, but I don't really get into full on specifics until it's like a week to 2 weeks out. And that's when I really go through and schedule 30-minute increments. But I also have focuses for each day of the week. And then I also have focuses for each week of the month. And I mean, that took me a little time to get there in the sense. So like the first full week of the month is podcast week. And I do content on Tuesdays and Thursdays and podcast interviews and calls on Wednesday. The second week of the full second week of the month is blog and social media content. So whether it's me doing it or I have a VA doing it, so that way I can create some consistency and rhythm and we're basically getting ahead for the next month. So also having focuses for days of the week and then weeks of the month month has been super helpful too in knowing like the certain constraints and having those boundaries. So it's like if someone wants to take a call, I always, now it's not perfect, but I always encourage for a Wednesday call because that's when I want to do all my calls, whether it's a podcast interview for my podcast or another podcast. But then that way I can like be more efficient and not have to do, it's called, you lose time and energy when you context switch. So if you're constantly going in between like two different types of tasks, you lose time and energy. So it's just a way to be more efficient and productive with your time.
I have so many thoughts and questions on everything you just shared.
I know you love that stuff too. So what do you
definitely do? Well, okay. I feel like I always tell my community, my clients and students this, that like, I believe you can evolve over time. So like what I am doing currently, my themes of the week right now may change in a month or two, just as based on my needs. So I'm always tweaking it a little bit, but I have a similar rhythm where like Mondays for me, I've themed days of the week. So like Mondays are usually a planning, administrative, and like internal meeting day. My vibe on Monday is just internal. Like I just want to take care of stuff internally on Monday. I don't want to deal with like, I don't want to have a call on Monday. I don't want to like do other things. I also like to do some learning on Mondays. So that's kind of like my Monday. And then Tuesdays are like full content creation all day, no meetings allowed on Tuesdays. And then Wednesdays and Thursdays are my call days. This is where I talk about things tweaking. I actually just changed it where Wednesdays and Thursdays, I only take calls. We're experimenting, so we'll see how it goes in the afternoon because I really had a time constraint. I needed more than just Tuesday to create content because to me, that includes writing emails, scheduling social, like doing the podcast, all that kind of stuff. I needed a little bit more room for that and just space in my calendar. So Wednesdays and Thursdays, the mornings are like focused work blocks, usually around content. And those afternoons are calls. And then Friday is my like free day. So like I might work if I feel really inspired to do something, but I don't have any deadlines on Fridays. And it's my go-to day for scheduling personal appointments. So if I have a dentist or a hair appointment, like, or a facial, I'm trying my best to put those all on Fridays. So
I love it.
That's kind of my rhythm. And it's been working well, but I am always tweaking. Like when earlier this year, I thought Monday would be a content creation day. And then I just like am not in that state of mind on Mondays. And now we made the adjustment to morning calls being tweaked. But one thing I don't do that like you inspire me so much around and I'm so intrigued by is this concept of not even just themed days, but themed weeks where like I like don't have an official rhythm for this. I do batch record the podcast. So there is like one day, like one Tuesday a month inevitably is a podcast day, but I don't really have like themed weeks. So I know you said 1 week is all about your podcast and another week is all about blog and social. Since you're doing things like projects, are the other 2 weeks really open for project-based tasks? Or how do you tell me a little bit more about your themed weeks?
Yes. So the themed weeks really help one. So I run everything through Asana, which you know this, and I'm sure your listeners know Asana, which I love Asana, but it helps from a workflow standpoint and knowing like getting me in the headspace of like, okay, the result that I need at the end of this week is to make sure that all podcast episodes for the next future month are scheduled and ready to go. And then the same thing with the second week is social media and also blog content. What was your question again? Just make sure I'm answering it.
You're good. Yeah, no, I was curious. I guess it had a little bit 2 parts depending on how you answer it. But I was curious what you do the other weeks. But I was also wondering how you make it fit with like creating a funnel. Like where does that time, like where are you working on that?
So I will one of the reasons why, no, that's a great question. And one of the things the weeks 3 and weeks 4 are really for like everything else that I'm working on in terms of like beta programs, anything else for like funnel, lead generation, all that stuff. I still focus on and like look at lead generation and my money and everything like on a daily basis. But the main reason for the themed weeks is so that I am just personally not in and out of the process, so that my VAs know that like the first full week of the month, this is what's happening. So your weeks, their work might be a little bit heavier. And then same thing with the second week. And then that way, like, and again, I'm not doing necessarily like all, like my weeks aren't back to like, how do I say this? Like, my weeks, if I'm in a podcast week, that doesn't mean that my entire schedule 100% is filled with podcasts. Like I'm still working on other stuff, because what I can do from that standpoint is that because I've created processes around like the podcast and what needs to be done, I then will like record training modules and then start to outsource as much as I possibly can. So when it comes to like blogging, we like repurpose the solo cast content for blogs, and I've trained my VA on exactly how to do that and set up and schedule all the blog posts. So I still have a lot of time during those weeks to continue working on like evergreen funnels and also doing like course content, following up, servicing my clients or the students in my programs and things like that.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, because you're not necessarily spending every working minute of that week just doing podcast stuff, because you are outsourcing stuff. So you're not necessarily having to do every single piece of the puzzle yourself, which I think is really interesting, because I know you have a lot of thoughts on outsourcing and like when to do it, like not to wait too long.
Yeah.
Like tell me, I know you have thoughts. So just like tell me a little bit about your thoughts on outsourcing.
Yeah. I don't think you can ever, it's never too early and it's never too late to outsource. So I've worked with individuals who are super early on in their business and have like still work full time and are building their business and have been able to outsource some of the stuff that they don't need to be doing or want to be doing or have time to be doing to virtual assistants. And then I work with like business owners who have been in business for 3 to 5 years that maybe haven't really set up proper systems, but had a life event or got to a point where they're like, why the heck? Like it feels like Groundhog's Day. Why haven't I, like, what's going on? Why haven't I figured this out yet? And so that I work with them like more in a one-on-one monthly coaching capacity where we really dive into their business. And so it's never too early and it's never too late. And I also say like, even if you can outsource work an hour, pay someone an hour a week to do something, whether it's like $6 an hour, $10 an hour, $12 an hour, whatever that is, to get that time back so you can be spending time doing what you need to be doing, then that is amazing. So yeah, for the longest time, I was doing the entire podcast production process because I had time on my calendar and I was like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. It's easy. I can do it. No problem. It's really fine. I don't need to outsource it. And then it got to a place that I was like, okay, I'm spending 2 to 4 hours, depending upon if it's a solo cast or a guest interview, doing all of this stuff. Now, majority of the repeatable things that happen on a weekly, daily, monthly basis, 80% of those tasks are essentially outsourced. So there is a process, there is a template, there is follow-ups and everything that my team needs to know. And so I think like if you can get in the habit of creating templates and workflows like early on in the beginning, that's just going to set you up for success as your team grows and as you begin to scale your business. I also think like sometimes like I struggled with it too, with saying like, well, if I can do this, like why would I outsource it? And that could be something as like, oh, if I can easily clean my home, why would I pay someone else to do it? And so like for me in this moment, I still clean our house like on a weekly basis because it doesn't bother me. Like I kind of enjoy it, right? But if you are doing something that, you know, is stressful and it's getting in the way of your time and energy and you can outsource it, then why not? And not to feel guilty that just because you can do it, it doesn't mean that you should be doing it, especially if you're in a business and it takes you, I don't know, an hour to create all your graphics. Like, can you set up a process and like a guideline and teach a VA how to create graphics that you want to use for social media or for blog posts and things like that? So you no longer have to be doing it. And the answer is yes. And so like, think about how much time you get back. And that's also why I created Scale Your Way, because it's all about like schedule blocking and making the most of your calendar and how to set up like different calendars in Google Drive or in Google and all that stuff. But then also teaching like how to set up workflows and templates in Asana. Cause I think like that is one of the biggest, not skill sets, but if you can master, I guess it is. If you can master like how to outsource and set your business up from a system standpoint, it's going to definitely be way beneficial for you as a business owner in the long run.
I love all of that. And I always have wondered, anytime I hear someone, when I'm listening to a podcast, talk about their team or how they outsource, I just want to know how many people are on their team. Like, what are they outsourcing? Like, I want to know a little bit more because I think when we share that, it gives other people inspiration and ideas. So I know you mentioned like you don't outsource personally to a maid or something, but you do outsource to a podcast editor, it sounds like. Would you mind sharing with us like how many people you outsource to and maybe some examples of like what types of things you're outsourcing so that we can like get some ideas for things we could outsource as well?
Yeah. So I have 4 virtual assistants. I have one virtual assistant who is the inbox manager. She's like the inbox manager of the general inbox. And sometimes she gets into my inbox, but we haven't made that transition quite yet. So she is also not only managing the inbox, so she handles inquiries about partnerships, people who want to submit or pitch their client or pitch themselves on the podcast. So she like has a template set up on how she's supposed to respond with that. She manages a lot of the podcast process, especially when it comes to guests and communicating with them and also scheduling. And I'm kind of bouncing all over here. So I'm just telling you what like Jen does to give some of that. Jen and I do weekly 30-minute status calls just to check in on if there's anything that we need to wrap up or get focused on. She handles a lot of like high level things. Like right now she's working through like merging my Teachable accounts because they're in 2 different things. So like giving her those sort of tasks. Let's see, what else does she like do? I mean, she manages a lot of the day-to-day stuff on that capacity. Then Kim is, she handles a lot of social media. She does podcast production. She does like audio piecing, scheduling, launching. Then I've got Mark who does a lot of, he does like all the graphics for like podcast. I know like this is kind of like, they're kind of intertwined a little bit, but that's how I've like broken them up. He also manages the Her Way community, like our free Facebook group. So he lets people in. He also engages, he monitors that stuff. And then like, if I ever need like proofreading or things like that, I'll reach out to Kim or Mark to see if they have availability to do it as well. And then I have someone who manages just Pinterest alone. And so that is like, and Mark also does like blog content and stuff. So you can easily like take like content production and process is the best thing to start with right now. And I think it's the most common thing because all of us, a lot of times, like we're creating content, whether it's podcast, YouTube, blog, social media, things like that. You can create a process around it and do the same thing that you would do in terms of like getting your website built. You would do the same thing when you create a process. Just get a blank sheet of paper, write down all the steps that you do, like in detail, specific steps in detail, and then order them. And then that basically is your process. And you can easily transfer that to Asana, which I teach in Scale Your Way as well, like how to do that entire process. But yeah, like even now I realize like I'm still managing the content production. I'm like managing the process for all of these things. And so just last week, I made a job description for a content manager. And even though I'm like not ready or like I'm not at the point where I'm going to go out and find a content manager, I'm building what I want his or her role to be so that I can get clear on like, okay, what are the things that I'm doing that I no longer need to be or desire to be doing? Like, I don't have it like getting to a place of like following up and making sure that we're on schedule and stuff. Like, I want to hand that responsibility, that KPIs over to someone else so that is their role, is to manage all those processes.
I love that. Thank you so much for not only sharing more about your team, but all of that detail as well, because I even feel really inspired by that because I don't have as many people helping me. And I am kind of at the place where I know I need more help. And I would like more help, but it's still a topic that I'm like, oh, who's the right next fit? Like what's the next role I need? And I think it's really helpful for everyone to just hear a little bit more about how people are dividing up these responsibilities. And I think it is really interesting. I know you said there's some overlap, but in general, everyone kind of has like their special place and no one is necessarily doing all of it, which I think is really important. So often we look for like that one VA who's going to do everything. And I really am starting to think more and more now that like finding specialists to do just a few things is more impactful in the long run. So
yeah. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. There's one more thing too is like I shared, I use Asana, is like creating a training library. So there's a software application called Loom, which you've maybe have talked about it on the podcast before. But like just this morning, I was enrolling someone into one of the programs and she had won this like giveaway thing. So I was enrolling her. And instead of just me like, okay, it'll take 5 minutes, I'll just do it on my own. I was like, well, wait a second. Why don't I use Loom and record myself explaining how to enroll someone into a course? And then what I do is I have that link and then I can create a training library in Asana so that my team has access to it. So if at any time I'm like, hey, enroll this customer, they already know how to do it, or they at least know where to go to access like the how. So that's a really great thing that people can do.
Yeah, I saw you share about that on Instagram stories. You guys should follow Amanda if you don't on Instagram. I think that's so helpful. And it's something that I do as well. I admittedly could do a better job of consistently recording what I'm doing, even when I don't have someone to delegate it to immediately. Because I think so often when it comes to outsourcing, people are like, oh, it's going to take me so long to train someone. But really, if you just record yourself doing it and leave whatever notes you need, then like the training's done for whenever you have someone, like it's already been created. So I think that's an incredible tip. And I just want to thank you so much for your time here today, Amanda. I feel like we've talked about so many good and valuable, actionable tips and strategies for the listeners and for everyone who's here. So I just thank you so much. And I know that you've mentioned Scale Your Way a few times. I think you also have a freebie for our listeners. So tell us where we can find out more about you and Scale Your Way.
Yeah, you can find the freebies. So one of the things that I have is the Ultimate Leap checklist and starter kit. So definitely if you're in your full-time job and you are looking to like leverage your skill set and you just need a little direction, you can head to shediditherwaypodcast.com/leap. And then if you're at all interested in Scale Your Way, you can head to shediditherwaypodcast.com/scale your way.
Yeah, I'll have links to both of those beneath this podcast as well. So you guys can just head right over there from the show notes. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, Amanda. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Megan. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and learning from Amanda. She is truly brilliant when it comes to systems and operations in business. And I'm so excited that you know her now as well. So be sure to click the links in the show notes beneath this podcast so that you can go check out more about Scale Your Way and learn more about Amanda. And we would both love it if you would share your biggest takeaways on Instagram stories or wherever you hang out on social media. Be sure to tag both myself and Amanda so that we can share it with our communities as well. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. And I will see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Productive Life Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much to me if you would share your biggest takeaway on your Instagram stories or wherever you hang out. This helps me understand what you find the most helpful so that I can make more episodes and resources like this. If this podcast has helped you at all, please take just 1 minute to leave a review on iTunes so that we can help spread the word about the Productive Life Podcast with others who may enjoy it. And last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get the latest episodes sent to you directly. To learn how to work with me one-on-one or get instant access to freebies, trainings, templates, workshops, and more, be sure to go to meganmins.com right now. I'll see you in the next episode.